again. Michael Rotumah is the Chief Executive of Larrakia Nation. They are calling for investment in prevention and community-led solutions. I spoke to him a little earlier today. How have you been feeling today about this latest tragedy?
Yeah, look, obviously it's a stark reminder of the systemic issues that we have, but, this really hurts to the core. It hurts everyone. This kind of behaviour needs to stop. And, I think it's another senseless, tragic loss of life. And we need to come together and come in solidarity and just look at how we can become a better Northern Territory.
I think everyone in the community, Michael, has a connection to that corner store, even if it's not your local shop. I know for me, I've often popped in there to find interesting little treats, even though it's not my corner store. What has this little shop meant to you and your family and your staff?
Yeah, look, I think, nightclub shops have been around for a long time. I've been there many times as a kid and many times as an adult. My wife regularly goes there, and so much that we had one of our employees who was there with their son 5 minutes just beforehand. So it's really, really sad that this has happened, and unfortunately, we're now dealing with a really broken community. But it's how we pick the pieces up and come together again.
The Chief Minister's made an announcement about further bail reform today, and I'll get to that in a moment, because you have some ideas and some particular suggestions for change. You're calling for systemic change, saying that governments are only responding to complex social issues with punitive measures while failing to adequately invest in addressing the root causes. What do you see as being the root causes?
Yeah, obviously, I think poverty and homelessness, intergenerational trauma and social exclusion are four of the key areas that are addressing some of these issues. I think when we're 12 times the national average for homelessness, our government needs to actually work harder with the Commonwealth to get a bigger piece of the pie so we can address this drastic need. We've got people who are living 20 to 30 as an average in 3-bedroom houses in remote communities. We've got a 10-year public housing wait list in Darwin and other regional centres. It's not good enough, and we need to invest in the right places, not be reactive with building new prisons, because that type of punitive measure, it's just a symptom of a failed system.
You have made some really specific calls. Amongst them, you're calling on senior Aboriginal lawmen and women from remote communities to work alongside Larrakia Nation in restoring community discipline and cultural authority. Sounds like a really interesting idea. Can you tell me a little bit more about this proposal? What would this look like?
Yeah, obviously, as a country, Australia prides itself on promoting as having the oldest living continuous culture in the world, but they're not allowing our Aboriginal law to coexist with white man's law. Now, people might, grapple with that a little bit, but that's the law that we have grown up with, and we know our rights from wrongs through that law. And if we let those empower those men and women to address our young people accordingly. And I'm not saying going back to the old ways of spearing in the leg or anything like that, but there's other ways of getting that message across that, through our Aboriginal lawmen and women, they can look at addressing some of the issues with our young people who just don't fear the white man's law.
Have you got any examples of what that might look like if it's not spearing people in the leg?
Yeah, obviously, I guess when we're looking at some of these individuals who are already incarcerated or out on bail or, or on their pathway to going into the system, a lot of them are lacking love and care and support. And so we're looking at that, promoting cultural reconnection, educational employment pathways and personal and leadership development, so we're really keen to sort of work with government on that, and we have been talking to government about this for some time.
You've also called for returning non-permanent residents to their home communities where appropriate and addressing unacceptable behaviours that harm our people, Larrakia people, and the Larrakia reputation. Who would that apply to, the returning of non-permanent residents?
Yeah, obviously, this is a free country and people can travel anywhere. However, people can't just travel freely to areas within the Aboriginal Land Trust. You actually need a permit to go there, so permit systems don't apply to the capital cities around the country and obviously to Darwin and Larrakia country. But, I think it's time for the Northern and Central and Tiwi and Underleakal land councils to sort of work together with government and work with organisations and traditional owners like Larrakia to look at, restoring community discipline and cultural authority.
Tell me more, though, about returning non-permanent residents and permits. Does that mean that people from remote communities who are maybe known troublemakers might be banned from Darwin?
Yeah, definitely. Whether it's 3 strikes and you're out or something like that, I'm not sure. But, I think we need to have a look at, we've got people here in Darwin. They're not necessarily residing at a premises or a registered premises. They might be rough sleeping and have been doing it for some years. Obviously there's some issues there that need to be addressed. And, I think working with those individuals and trying to get them reconnected back to land and culture is something that's really, really important to our people. But it can be very, very difficult as well.
You wrote to both the Chief Minister and the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Senator Melandiri McCarthy, in March, seeking their support for a formal initiative that empowers senior Aboriginal lawmen and women to lead culturally appropriate responses to this growing crisis. So you made those calls around the stuff you've just talked about before this latest tragedy. What had prompted this call last month?
I think it was something that we talked about, and it was for Minister Edgington, not Minister McCarthy, that I wrote to. But what brought this about was obviously the conflict that was happening in Alice Springs. And obviously, we already had our fair share of incidences here in Darwin and growing incidences. And so it was something that I had spoken to the Chief Minister previously about, looking at empowering Aboriginal lawmen and women to come and look at culturally appropriate responses that will support Larrakia Nation, and talking to these individuals who are sleeping rough or who are behaving badly and talking to them under Aboriginal law about getting them to go back home.
Did you get a response from the Chief Minister or from Minister Edgington?
No responses yet.
And have they spoken to you at all ahead of today's announcement around the tougher bail measures that they're about to introduce?
No, they haven't.
How disappointing is that you haven't had a response? We've heard a lot of people today saying, where are the Aboriginal leaders in our community responding to this? And clearly you have been on the front foot in many ways. How disappointing is it not to have heard back from the Chief Minister?
Yeah, obviously it's disappointing. We've had some dialogue in the past. We know she's quite busy, but at the same time, these are really important issues, and we've outlined that previously. And I think it's time that we stop talking about it and get on with it and work with us as leading organisations in our community for culturally led solutions.
Michael Rotumah on ABC Radio Darwin and across the territory. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Larrakia Nation. Michael, the Chief Minister has announced today, just a short time ago, that they are drafting a new set of laws to further strengthen bail laws in the Northern Territory. They want the toughest bail laws in the country. Parliament will resume next week. It's been recalled early to pass these laws. Is tougher bail important? We know that the alleged offender was out on bail.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with having tougher bail laws, but, the evidence points to that incarceration doesn't prevent crime. It entrenches it, especially when young people enter that system.
All right. Michael, was there anything else you wanted to add before I let you go?
Again, we are deeply saddened by this tragic loss. This doesn't have to be the case. We need to galvanise as a community, not be further divided by incidences like this. And, it's important that we wrap our arms around together and look at coming together to, provide solutions to some of these problems that have been systemic.
Michael Rotumah, Chief Executive of Larrakia Nation. What do you think of some of those ideas, forcing people to return to their communities, a permit system for some people from remote communities?